hear the most annoying sound in the world?
Welcome to Rage Against the Mainstream, your full spectrum source for all things music, insight, and opinion. My name is Bill, and I'm joined here today with Connor, Steve, and Michael.
Yo,
Welcome back, Mike.
thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
How you guys doing today?
Swell. Whoa. Weird.
Whoa.
Fucking weird.
Great.
Well,
Fuck our swell.
if you guys are listening to this on the day it comes out, today is September 9th, 2019. Have you guys encountered anything new or interesting this week?
Yes.
Yes, I have as well.
What about you, Michael?
I had a gig last night. I played till 1 o'clock in the morning and drove home from the Poconos and got home at 3:30 a.m. So
That's definitely interesting.
So Mike's here, but he might totally
Yes, but
be
it's,
here.
So what'd you guys find this week?
I got Sheer Mag's second album. They're from Philly. A Distant Call. They're half of the band is also in The Guest, which I've recommended before.
Oh, yeah.
Sheer Mag is a lot bigger than The Guest, though, and it's kind of a pretty anticipated album. Yeah, A Distant Call. First single, Steel Sharpens Steel.
That's awesome. What about you, Steve?
It's got this 80s thrash band. The band's called Exhorter. They've released their first album in 1990. It's actually like a quintessential thrash album of the genre. The singer actually sounds a lot like Phil Anselmo from Pantera. Like, it's a really, really good band.
That's pretty cool.
But they released their last album in 92, and they're actually releasing a new album now after 17 years. It comes out on the 20th of this month. They released 2 new songs. I'm going to personally say I don't like the direction they're going. They're becoming more of like a metalcore, like Hatebreed type sound.
Oh.
Yeah, they don't have that like traditional like 80s thrash vibe to it anymore. But again, I mean, if you're a fan of the band, it's, definitely, there's only 2 songs out at this point, and they're definitely at least worth a listen to kind of get an idea. But the album is called More in the Southern Skies. It comes out September 20th.
All right. Well, that's
Yeah.
pretty cool.
Yeah.
You may have heard me mention this band before, the band Camino. They toured with that singer-songwriter Ben Rector. No?
Can't recall.
They're one of those bands where I've seen them live, not knowing anything about them, and instantly became a fan because of how good their live show was. They had released an EP a while ago that I think I recommended, or it was new or interesting that week, I forget. But regardless, they put out a new album 2 weeks ago. It's called Try Hard. And that's actually pretty sweet. It's going to wind up being my recommendation for the week, too,
Okay.
because the album itself is just really, really good.
I rediscovered this bass player. It's a girl named Tal Wilkenfeld. I don't know if you ever heard of her. She's from Australia. She came over here in the United States when she was 16. It's actually 16 years ago. And she came over here to be musician, and she plays the bass. She came over here to go to school out in Los Angeles. She graduated from school, and then she got a gig because of how amazing she is. She started playing with Jeff Beck,
Oh, wow.
and all of a sudden she did a tour of Jeff Beck. If you look on YouTube, you see her. She's like 20 years old playing on stage with Jeff Beck.
That
She's
definitely
just-
shows how good she is. She's
She's
playing
an
with Jeff
amazing
Beck.
bass
Yeah.
player. She wound up playing, also doing recordings with the Allman Brothers, Prince, Herbie Hancock. She went on tour with, also Chick Corea. So she's got the jazz fusion kind of thing going.
It's weird you mentioned Herbie Hancock. I was going to recommend last week Headhunters by Herbie Hancock. Such a great album.
There's
Yeah.
videos of this girl all over YouTube of her playing with all these different people live. She's got Jackson Brown's kind of her executive producer now, and I didn't realize she actually is going solo now. She's came out with a brand new album and some new songs, which are incredible. She's got an incredible band.
What's her name again?
Tal, first name's Tal, T-A-L. Her last name's Wilkenfeld. And
Definitely going to check that
Yeah.
out.
yeah, she's amazing bass player. She wrote all this stuff. So now she's singing, and she just came out with an an album and some really cool stuff on it. She did her band was the opening act for the Who on the last tour.
wow.
Pete Townsend really likes her.
That's
her
crazy.
music. And so her band opened up for the Who. So there's some videos if you look on YouTube of her
Yeah.
opening up for the Who, and some of her songs are just it's different. It's different than what
Yeah.
you're hearing going on out now.
That's something.
And
Opening
her
up for the
music's
Who.
very very interesting, but it's very melodic too. And it's
Yeah,
cool
she
stuff.
came out with an album in March of this year called Love Remains.
Yep.
It's a 10-song LP. It's actually, she's got some decent amount of music on Apple streaming, at least I see.
And she has
3 singles off the album. Yeah, I mean,
the keyboard player is the keyboard player from Tom Petty.
Oh wow.
Benchmark Trent, who's been around forever, and but she's really really good.
That's awesome.
So that would be if you want to hear some good music that's different than what you're hearing mainstream today. She's listened to a couple of songs of hers, and you're like, wow, she's really good.
That's awesome.
And some of her bass solos from say 10 years ago when she was playing with Jeff Beck, you just listen to her and she was like 20 years old back then, and she's just.
You know, it's kind of funny because you never really hear much things about like really good bass players.
yeah.
Like
Well,
everyone always focuses on guitar players and drummers and singers. Like the bass player is just kind of the one that gets the short end of the stick or gets the shaft all the time.
Yeah.
You know, unless it's someone.
Paul McCartney,
Yeah. Well, besides Paul McCartney, I think he's an extreme example.
Flea.
Cliff
Flea-
Burton,
Cliff Burton.
Geezer Butler.
Yeah, but we're only talking. That's only like 5. That's only like 5 examples.
Yeah, compared to the amount of
Yeah.
vocalists and guitarists, they definitely get more of a spotlight. Even drummers to an extent.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, I get you.
The White Stripes bassist got no love.
Yeah, even
No.
for that bass line. But yeah, that bassists seem to be the most expendable in any band at this point, especially in today's era.
Yeah, it's just
weird.
wild. Well,
Yeah.
because it could be all replaced with computers and synthesizers
Exactly.
now.
Yep.
I mean, not that it couldn't be before, but now it's just even easier to do it. Like, why?
Yeah, put it this way: if you go to record an album, and you don't have a bassist. It's way
Keyboard.
easier to do so than if, like you say, we don't have our guitarist or we don't have our
Ah, yeah.
drummer.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
100%.
Yeah,
I mean, you could always just use like a pitch correction pedal or something and just take it an octave lower and be fine.
yeah. You could always release your 4th album and not even have it be heard.
Yeah, that's strange too. You know,
Interesting.
I wonder who did that.
That's weird. All right then.
I missed the reference on that.
And Justice for All.
Oh,
On this day in music history.
1956. Elvis Presley makes the first of 3 contracted appearances on the Ed Sullivan Show. Sullivan had previously said that he would never have such an act on, but ratings prevailed, and Sullivan offered Elvis a record $50,000 for the 3 shows.
Isn't it ironic?
Yeah.
Do you know that when he was on the show, they could only film him from the waist
Above
up
the hips.
Yeah,
they
that's
censored
crazy.
his hips.
because his shaking of the hips was considered
Well,
too racy for
eccentric
television
pelvis.
at the time.
It's amazing to think that in 1956 that was considered like atrocious behavior. Look at
Yeah.
some of the shit you see on Instagram and YouTube
my
today that doesn't even get censored. I mean, think about
No.
some of the movies that kids see at like such a young age and it's like nothing to them. But
Think
in
of the movies that we've seen at
1956
such a young age.
yeah, exactly. I mean, just the progression of like censorship is totally like. Do they even put explicit content on CDs anymore? Like,
I
is
think
there a
they do.
point? You know what
I
mean?
think mostly the artists just
Yeah.
kind of put it on themselves because
Yeah,
they
dude,
think
it looks
it's
cool. Yeah.
Yeah, it's printed on the album art. It's not even a sticker
Yeah.
anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like when the Doors were on Ed Sullivan, and they sang "Light My Fire." They wanted them to change the words, "Girl, we couldn't get much higher."
Yeah.
They wanted him to change the words to something else, and
That's ridiculous.
he didn't do it. He
Yeah,
just sang.
he sang
Well,
it
it's
like
funny.
more pronounced even.
Yeah.
Dude, it's funny though because the true story beyond that is not that Jim actually purposely did that. He actually was nervous that he came out in an interview and like was able to tell somebody that he was nervous, and just because he had sang that song so many times, he totally fucking forgot and just sang it anyway. It wasn't like it's supposed to be an
In the
intentional.
movie, he's like
Well,
super
you You have to
pronounced when
understand
he
the
does
Oliver
it.
Stone portrayal of him was to make it more dramatic and hyped up. But if you read No One Here Gets Out Alive,
Yeah.
which is also kind of not too historically accurate, but it's much more accurate than the movie, it comes out that people close to him had known that he had talked about that show afterwards and was like, that wasn't like intentional, but whatever. You know, like he didn't regret it, but he was like, no way did he like purposely try to do that.
That's funny.
1975, Paul McCartney and Wings begin their historic 13-month world tour. U.S. performances will be recorded as the double album Wings Over America. The group plays to over 2 million fans during the course of the tour.
This was a big deal at the time because I remember because this tour was the biggest tour ever at that point, going around the world, and the 3-album set that came out of it, sold millions, and it was really well done.
That's
Paul McCartney
cool.
was really meticulous
Yeah.
about remixing it, and at that time, it was just amazing. The stage show they had for the time was way ahead of its time, and he had grand pianos and all this kind of stage setup and all these musicians, which had never been done before, and so it was a big deal at the time.
1982, coming off the monstrous success of Moving Pictures, Rush releases Signals, their 9th studio album. It features Subdivisions, a song that becomes a regular part of their live repertoire. The album hits platinum status only after 2 months.
That's crazy. That's a
Yeah.
short amount of time to go platinum.
Yeah.
Subdivision's my favorite Rush tune.
That's your favorite
Is
Rush
it?
song?
Yeah, I saw that tour, and again, Rush was ahead of their times with their multimedia tour.
Yeah.
1988. It's the finale of a 4-day garage sale when Elton John cleans house, which in his case looks like a high-end Hoarders. Among the items sold are the boots he wore in the movie Tommy and his Statue of Liberty stage costume that the 41-year-old felt he had outgrown. The takeaway is $6.2 million.
So, did anybody here see the adaptation Rocket Man?
No, I wanted
Nah.
to. I haven't got a
haven't seen it
chance yet.
That would be a good recommendation.
Well,
for down the
allegedly-
pike a bit.
Well, I'm waiting for it to come to DVD
Listen,
where it's easier.
Allegedly, there's a great copy on Kodi.
Oh, Lodi on the water twig.
Lodi on the water twig. I watched it, and it's ironic because the way it starts is like him walking into like an AA meeting type setup, and then he starts telling his story. Here's the thing: the movie, I don't want to get too much into it. Great film. There's a lot of musical moments,
Oh, okay.
and it's almost like they were trying to ruin the film because the movie parts are great, the acting is great, but the musical scenes that they keep adding in there suck. But it's funny at the end, when they talk about, they kind of like wrap everything up, like so and so after 20 years,
Yeah.
and then they show a little bit. They said Elton John, like, he's sober for so many years, but another thing he had was a shopping addiction. And they straight up admitted that he still has a shopping addiction. They showed a picture of him with, like, just ridiculous shit. Because that was a huge problem for him, is, like, not even with just the drugs and the drinking, but he had a huge shopping problem, like, legit.
Well, I mean, this shows it right here. I mean,
Yeah.
if the takeaway from a garage sale is $6.2 million, I mean,
Really?
how many yard sales have you ever been to that probably made over $100?
That's
None.
None.
I mean, he's selling some of the stuff at crazy high prices, though, just because he owned it.
Of course, dude.
He
Yeah.
he had a thing with flowers. He always wanted fresh
That was
flowers
another
around,
thing. Yep.
and so as an apartment, he spent thousands of dollars every week just to have
That's
fresh
crazy.
flowers around.
Yep.
Could you imagine that kind of like fuck you money?
Yeah.
Jimmy Page has a crazy house. I
Yeah.
just read a story about that at some castle outside of London, and it's like, I think it's from the 13th century or something.
Yes,
And it's-
I've seen.
Or
such.
no,
I've seen pictures of it.
it's like maybe 150 years that old actually, but it's like designed in like some old 13th century Gothic style, French Gothic or some shit.
It
But,
makes sense. It's fitting.
Yeah.
He pays like crazy money to keep that house like meticulously like period correct.
Well, he's Jimmy Page. He can afford it.
I mean, he pretty much just stays in the house all day now. My thing, in 1992, Nirvana's feud with Guns N' Roses reaches a tense climax when Axl Rose threatens Kurt Cobain backstage at the MTV Video Awards. Side note, Dave Grohl spit on the keys of the piano that he thought Axl Rose was going to be playing on
And whose
during November
piano actually
Rain, and it
was
was
it?
actually Elton John's
Yup.
piano.
That's
Yeah.
so funny.
And he was like, "Oh my god, I just spit on Elton John's."
Also,
piano keys."
ironically enough, I was like telling you this also in '92, the Montreal show with
Metallica.
Metallica and Guns N' Roses. Axl had a huge love for the grunge scene, specifically Nirvana. He used to rave about Nirvana, but Kurt just was like blunt out, like, I don't
And they
fucking
didn't
like
have love for him.
No, dude. And it was funny. There was even a part where, like, Axl came out, like, was just like almost like a kid who was like getting bullied. He's like, I just don't understand why they don't like me and shit. There's like literally interviews of this, and it was funny because Axl asked Kurt to have Nirvana join that Montreal show to actually play with them, and it would have been huge. And Kurt was flat out like, nope, you're corporate rock and roll. We don't like your style. We're like literally anti what you're about. And lo and behold, Axl didn't play that show because of, my throat hurts, even though he's been drinking Jack and smoking Reds in the green room the entire time. So Axl Kurt came out and was like, this is exactly why we didn't want to play that type of show with you.
1994, Green Day plays a free concert at the Hatch Shell in Boston. A few songs into their set, many in the crowd cross the line from moshing to rioting, and police order an end to the show.
What's up with all these acts that shouldn't have riots having riots?
Well, Green Day
like
in
the Jackson
94
Five.
Yeah, but Green Day in 94, they were kind of trying to be that. So you figure it's like the pop punk kids that try to act way tougher than they are. So it's not totally out of left field, but we know, Green Day, we know you now.
Yeah.
Like, this ain't you, Green Day. Go on.
Could you imagine, like, people rioting to, like, When I Come Around?
Oh, my God.
She screams in silence.
It's those rich New England Boston kids.
Yeah.
Well, they
Nothing
love
better
their
to do.
hardcore up there.
Yeah,
With
Boston.
bandanas
hardcore.
across their
Boston
face to
cool,
wake
Boston
me up
cool.
when September ends, like trying to
pretty good.
hop the fences and shit.
2003, John Mayer releases his second studio album, Heavier Things. The album title is a response to some critics who believed his previous songs were too soft. The album debuts at number 1 on the U.S. Billboard 200 chart.
I think this is that John Mayer album that has that song.
Waiting on world to change.
No, I think it's that one that has that
Yeah,
song.
it's that one.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
I thought it was that one. Like, I want to run through the walls of my high school. I want to scream at the top of my lungs. That song. I thought that was this album.
Dude, to be honest with you, for the longest time, I couldn't separate him and Dave Matthews. I always just thought it was like Greta Van Fleet to Led Zeppelin. Like, it's just like, oh, Dave Matthews putting out like at least somewhat decent
Heavier
tracks.
Things was
But
huge, though.
that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Some of their songs that in John Mayer, that's why I would treat it as like, wow, Dave Matthews stepped their game up here. And then I realized, like, oh shit, that's John Mayer. I always have a tough
You know who
time.
I always get confused with?
Waiting on the World to Change was not on
Yeah.
Heavier Things. I misspoke.
What was the single?
Something
Singles.
I'm not familiar with.
John Mayer is one of Nicole's favorite artists.
Yeah.
Bigger
I
Than
like
My
'em. I think it's
Body.
cool. I like
Bigger
it.
Than My Body. Is that the song you were singing?
No.
Clarity, Daughters. Those were the Heavier Things hits.
No, I don't know.
But then came
I
Continuum.
used to play that song you're talking about.
Did you?
I played it, yeah.
What's it called?
I don't remember. I can't remember. I can't remember.
He's in The Dead now. Dead and Company.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Moving on up.
Speaking of
Two.
moving on.
Actually, we're not moving on up because it's still 2003. Simon and Garfunkel make it official, announcing plans to reunite and tour for the first time in 20 years. They get more per ticket than any other tour that year, $136.90. They donate $1 million to the Children's Health Fund at the end.
That's cool.
It's a lot of money per ticket.
Yeah.
Who do you think they
Yeah.
are? Foo Fighters?
Yeah. Well,
Metallica.
Yeah. You think they're Metallica?
yeah. I don't know. I'm definitely not.
They
I
donate
love
1
some-
million.
Huh?
They donate 1 million. That's the gate from one show.
Yeah,
Pretty
exactly.
much, yeah.
They
Act
you
like
could
they're
see
losing
Alice
money.
in Chains like 7 times for that price.
Oh my God,
Fuck
yes.
yeah. Well, you could
Or just
spend that.
bring
Yeah.
6 friends with you.
The ironic thing is, this is a huge reunion tour for a group that was like quite famous in their time.
Oh,
And
yeah.
they're charging $136.90 in 2003. $136.90 today will get you lawn tickets for the Foo Fighters.
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
Bullshit. That's what I'm saying. When you brought that up, I really had to put that in perspective. It's bullshit.
Mm-hmm. It's a lot of
For
money.
Foo Fighters.
And it's like consistent. Like they'll keep touring. It's not like Foo Fighters comes around once every 5 years.
Actually, Foo Fighters haven't been here in like 3.
No, they just came.
Did they?
Like
They were here
like,
last year.
Yes,
I think.
dude. That's
Yeah.
that's the price I was talking about. It was $140 for the lawn, and then they played not too long ago again with Social Distortion at the
Yep.
Wells Fargo.
Oh,
Center.
yeah, that's
that was
right.
even more money.
Yep.
Didn't Simon and Garfunkel do like a free concert in Central Park
I
like
think
20
so.
some years ago? I think
Probably.
Wouldn't doubt it. They're that type of band.
Who do we like better, Paul Simon or Art Garfunkel?
Simon.
I think Art Garfunkel.
Really? Yeah, I
Yeah.
like Art Garfunkel better.
Paul Simon.
Yeah.
2014. Who doesn't like a free gift?
I like free gifts.
Apparently, about 500 million iTunes users who created an uproar when U2's then latest album, Songs of Innocence, showed up sans charge and sans permission in their personal libraries.
You know, it's kind of funny. We have a vintage review of said album that I'm going to play it right now.
Oh, really?
This morning, I grabbed my iPhone and I was going through my music and I found this U2 album. So I gave it a quick listen and it was absolute garbage. Why would they put this shit on my phone? It just pisses me off. I don't even want to own an iPhone anymore.
Music news. Today in music news, September 9th, 2019. First thing we got here is Tool singer Maynard James Keenan received death threats from fans over the wait for the new album.
Reverend Maynard James Keenan.
The album now has been out for 10 days. The article here is, it's taken Tool a long time to get their new record put together, but some fans are taking their impatience to a whole nother level. According to an interview with drummer Danny Carey, vocalist Maynard James Keenan has received death threats from some people who aren't happy about the 13-year wait. Carey opened up about the pressure the band had to deliver a new record and the expectations from fans. It's quoted here, "I felt bad for him, and he even told me he was getting death threats from these idiots out there," Carey said. They just have no idea what our work ethic is. These things just don't happen, man. There's no other record that's going to sound like this Tool record. What you hear is what you get, and what you get is what it takes to get it done. And it's not an easy process. Keenan has been handling the majority of questions for the band regarding the new album since about 2015. I felt anxiety because they would blame our singer, and it's not his fault. We all have our own things going on, lives, families, other projects, other interests. So it's ready when it's ready, Jones said. But I appreciate the dedication from our fans, the very strong dedication. But the record has turned out cool, and it's very different than our last record. I think that's what we all wanted.
So
You still haven't heard it yet,
Is
right?
it called Fear Inoculum?
Yeah, it's called Fear Inoculum.
That's the
and
album
it's funny.
title, too?
Yeah, and it's funny because I actually ordered a vinyl version of it. It was supposed to be signed by Alex Gray, who does the artwork. And it's funny because it's available. Like, I could listen to it very easily, but I refuse to. And I think I add more to the hype to it, which could
You
probably
just
hurt
wanna
it.
Wait for the vinyl.
Yeah, I just really want to hear it because it's
Hear it
just
how it's meant to be
such
sounded.
I remember, dude. I remember the first day I went to Clearview. I had a 10,000 Days hoodie. I used to wear it all the fucking time.
I remember that hoodie.
Yeah, man. Like, I really like Tool, and it's funny with this album and the anticipation. It does suck because there was a long period of time where they were like, we're done the instrumentals. We're just waiting on Maynard. We're done the instrumentals. Danny Carey finished the drum parts. Adam Jones and Justin. Like, it was such a huge problem, and everyone was blaming Maynard because he was doing stuff, and they would see him touring with Perfect Circle or doing something with Pucifer, and everyone's like, well, what the fuck about Tool, man? Like, they had they had so many expected release dates over the past 5 years almost for this album, and just never hit. So every year it was like a big thing of like, oh, it's coming out this summer, it's coming out this fall, every year since now its release.
Yeah.
So I get it. It just sucks because, again, I actually read an article. I try to stay away from the reviews and any listening things and links and stuff because I just don't want to hear it yet. But there was an article I read where somebody straight up said like they should not have released this album. They just shouldn't have released it because now like you kind of set the hype so much that you're almost like killing a credibility of a band.
That's just crazy.
Like I'm a fan of Game of Thrones, and it's the same thing. Game of Thrones season 8 was such a letdown that's like I don't even feel like recommending the show to anybody.
Yeah, you told me that before.
Yeah,
because I wanted to watch it.
Yeah, it's like I don't even feel like recommending it because it's just the way it ends. It's almost like with this album, but again, I can't deny Opiate, Undertow, Enema, Lateralis, even 10,000 Days. Their entire discography is great.
Yeah.
So regardless of how this album sounds, if it's so different, like they're saying, and a lot of fans are like it's mixed reviews at this point in my eyes. That's the thing about Tool. I'm trying to get away from the bias of the time it took and the expectation, and just go into it listening to it like it's any other album released by this band. I mean, that's the biggest thing with it.
Well, we hope you guys stop threatening Maynard
Why threaten him? If you threaten to kill him, then he can't
Then
finish
you-
the album.
can't
Yeah, then you're
finish
never getting
You're never
anything.
gonna get it.
It's probably some like dude in his mom's basement, just like
Probably the same
Might just
people
be
that
trying
were
to scare him into finishing it.
exactly.
Yeah,
It's
like-
probably the same people that are writing Lou Reed.
probably. Dude.
Rest in peace.
All right. Next thing we got here is Slipknot pass Ed Sheeran for first UK #1 album in 18 years. Slipknot's new album, We Are Not Your Kind, has seemingly been one of the only things on the metal community's mind the past few weeks, and it looks like it's paid off for the band. The Nine have landed their first #1 record in the UK in 18 years, beating out Ed Sheeran's #6 collaborations project for the top spot. The band's new record snagged the top spot after making over 31,800 chart sales in its first week of release. The album is the band's 5th consecutive album to land in the top 5, with Iowa being their only other album to get to the #1 spot in the UK. This also marks the UK's 5th heavy metal record to get to the top spot in this decade. The others include Iron Maiden's Book of Souls, The Final Chapter, or The Final Frontier, and Avenged Sevenfold's Hail to the King, and Black Sabbath's 13.
Was Iowa a studio album?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Iowa is one of their heaviest.
It's old.
Yeah, it's really old.
2001, yeah.
And this is like before they had like really good masks. This is
Yeah.
like when like Corey Taylor had like a paper mache mask with like dreads like glued to it.
Yeah.
And Iowa, have you ever listened to Iowa, Steve?
That's the only album I actually can tolerate by Slipknot.
It's good
I'm
though,
not
isn't
a huge
it?
Slipknot fan at all, but yeah, that album's actually not.
It's
not
heavy.
bad. I mean, it's the same thing with people that like hate Tool, like Corey Taylor. I don't like the band, but I respect his vocal content. I respect some of the instrumentals. The Iowa album is actually a decent listen. Slipknot's just not my scene. I kind of put them in that class with like Five Finger Death Punch and like kind of like Disturbed, like that weird, obscure, like it's not metalcore. It's almost like just like heavy metal. Like,
Yeah,
but
exactly.
It's not death. It's just weird to put it. But
Slipknot's like it's like weird. It's like new metal, but it's not new
it's
metal.
like new
They always
metal
reminded me of
core-ish. But that's the thing;
Yeah.
they're more polished and more direct than Korn.
Yeah.
like,
Yeah,
Korn
they're
gets
more straightforward.
weird
They get
and-
more funky and
yeah,
stuff.
and like that's
Slipknot is just like quotes
the thing.
brutality like, the
hardcore,
whole
yeah,
time.
dude. But yeah, Iowa is actually not a bad listen. I'm not gonna deny
Who do you
that.
prefer, Korn or Slipknot?
Slipknot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Korn.
I'd rather just
About the same.
I'd rather just go to the desert island alone. To be honest,
I'm just glad they beat out Ed Sheeran.
Yeah,
it's
right,
true.
final.
Yeah,
And
I'm
the
not a fan of
UK
Ed
too,
Sheeran.
though. Like Ed Sheeran in the UK is like
He's their boy.
Yeah,
Yeah, I don't understand it.
I mean, it looks like it's kind
That'd
of
be
a
like
weird
Bush
dumb-
coming over here and knocking Nirvana off the #1.
with 16 stone.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure Nirvana was still way bigger than. Oh wait, no, that's what you're saying.
Yeah,
okay.
that's what I'm
It's
saying.
the
Yeah,
ironic
that
value
wouldn't
of it.
happen. Yeah.
No, it would be probably more like Nirvana holding the #1 over here, and then like Dido knocking Nirvana off the #1.
Yeah.
That's probably the like mirror equivalent.
To be fair, it does look like it's some kind of like throwaway Ed Sheeran album. It says #6 collaborations
what is it?
project, so it's probably
Yeah.
all like.
I
already
don't even
previously
know anything
released
about this album at
songs where
all.
He just did like duets or something with other people.
All right, the last thing we have here in music news is probably one of the most interesting things we have here today for this segment. Dwayne Allman's Layla guitar sells for $1 million at an auction. The guitar Dwayne Allman played on the Derek and Domino's classic Layla recently sold at auction for $1 million. Dwayne Allman, who is number 9 on Rolling Stone's 100 Greatest Guitarists list, which we've proved on this podcast doesn't mean anything. He also played the 1957 Les Paul Gold Top, which has been on display at the Allman Brothers Big House Museum in Macon, Georgia, on the Allman Brothers 1969 self-titled debut LP, and 1970s Idlewild South, the Marcon Telegraph reports. Following Allman's death in October 1971, the now former owner purchased the guitar in rough condition in 1971 and repaired and restored it over the ensuing decades. According to the auction house, musicians that visited Georgia often tested out the guitar, including Metallica's Kirk Hammett, ZZ Top Billy Gibbons, and the Rolling Stones. Oh, the Rolling Stones planned to borrow the guitar for a July 27th Georgia gig, but it was nixed due to the auction. Gotta have rock and roll said. What?
You gotta have rock and roll.
Oh, gotta have rock and roll is where this came from. The anonymous out-of-town buyer is pledged to keep it in the Big House collection for a few months, a year. It will be coming back to the Big House in late November. Big House Museum director Richard Brent told the Macon Telegraph, "We couldn't ask for more than that." Well, you think? Oh, can you bring the guitar back to our museum, even though you paid $1 million for it?
Yeah.
Hey, we kind of need
Probably.
it back here.
It's probably safer in the museum than there where
That's true
when the
too.
person's
That's
gonna
just-
keep
Yeah,
it.
but you would think though about traveling with it.
I was just gonna say that would be so
you
annoying.
need to
Imagine
have,
having
like, a
that set
fucking
up
gun
in your
safe.
house, and then it's all of a sudden it's oh, that time of the month, it's
November.
March.
Yeah.
I gotta drive it all the way down. And it's like
Yeah,
it's
Georgia.
not just like transferring a 42-inch TV or some shit. It's $1 million Les Paul. That
It would have to go into
literally,
a gun safe or something, like when it's not on display at a museum.
Bro, you'd have
Well,
to
yeah, if
hire. I
anybody
would
knew they
hire
had
an.
it.
Yeah.
It's
And
something
then it's
that could
also
easily
what?
be
It's just this
stolen.
guy
Oh my
driving
God,
down
yes.
the street. What if one guy found out who had it?
Yeah, what about
It's
if
got to
you,
be in like a fucking armored
what
truck.
if we stopped to fuel up, went inside to the store to take a piss, and someone just reached in and took it? I mean, that's a legitimate situation. That could
And-
happen.
But you see those
You
movies
can't
where
fly
like
a guitar. You don't want to fly a guitar because
no,
Yeah,
the
like-
pressure and everything.
And
And
would
then
have
what,
to
you
sit.
carry it
in
on a
the seat.
plane.
Yeah, we carry it on a plane
Yeah.
and sit it next to you.
Joe
I mean,
Bonamassa does
here's the
that.
thing.
He buys an
You
extra
buy a
ticket
first
for
class
first
ticket
class.
for the guitar.
Or his
Yeah.
guitar.
Yeah,
I'm sure though the guy who ever bought this, obviously, if he has expendable income like that, he has some sort of means and ways to be able to transport it. But
Yeah.
still, the sake, we couldn't ask for him for that. Of course, you couldn't. The guy could have just said, like, he probably
No.
made him feel bad. Like, you're gonna bring it back to the museum. People still want to. Why'd you auction it?
yeah, exactly.
Why the fuck did you auction it? Did you think that someone was gonna be just agreeable to like
Bring it back
Once we sell it, we'll just ask them like bring it back a couple times a month.
for a few months a year.
Like, come on, dude.
It's like-
yeah, hopefully he gets. It could just be like someone who's on like the board of the museum or something.
I don't. It doesn't. But that's it says
Something
an
tells me
anonymous.
if you're working at the Allman Brothers Museum, you're
An
not making
anonymous
enough money to be able to buy the
out-of-town
guitar.
buyer.
Could be run
dude.
by like his sister or something.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, the
Yeah.
guy definitely has some. It's his anonymous out of town buyer. Guys has some sort of credibility somewhere to be able to drop that type of money.
out of town.
That's what I'm
Yeah.
saying. So it's obviously not affiliated with the
And he's
museum,
also
but-
anonymous, so he
I
probably.
mean, they could lie about that though.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, if he's going as anonymous, he might actually be somebody within the music community.
Could be. I mean,
Keith.
Do you,
Richard's
when you
soft
say
situation.
the number 9 in a Rolling Stone, which doesn't mean anything, do you think Dwayne Allman should be higher, or do you think he should be lower?
Yo,
no,
listen.
I'm saying the list as a whole is very skewed.
yeah. Listen, man. I'm gonna tell you this. I actually picked him on my super group.
Yeah,
Dwayne
I,
Allman-
too, I know.
Something.
It's a
Dwayne
shame
Allman.
he died so young because he was
So
so good
Good man.
and so influential. He started the Southern rock genre on
That
his own,
slide
basically.
guitar, dude.
And yeah, he's really something. He was really something. It's a shame that he died so young.
Yeah,
I
man.
might say he probably deserves to be higher. Yeah,
I would say so as well.
I'm trying to think of who's 1, 2, 3,
I'll
and
take
4.
him over Eric Clapton.
yeah,
I know Hendrix and
100%.
Page are 1 and 2.
I'd probably take him.
I don't
over
know who's
Page.
3 and 4.
Let me ask you this. I'm gonna put it out there.
No, he's not better than Eddie Van Halen.
The other.
I mean, yes,
individual.
he is better than Eddie Van
The
Halen.
other individual.
Dimebag Darrell,
No.
Kurt Cobain,
Who do you mention more than often?
Kirk
Zach
Hammett.
Wilde.
Yep.
Oh yeah, he's way better than Zach Wilde.
Okay. I just want to put that out there.
Hold on, hold the
They're
phone.
different.
Yes, they are different.
I'm just saying for
But-
overall.
Zach Wilde plays guitar for like 8 hours a day.
Listen.
Still,
Yes, and I will tell you though.
These guys used to practice 20,
all day.
24 hours a
Yeah,
day.
Dwayne
They
Allman
used
is-
to hide in a house and just practice.
Zach Wilde did sit in with the Allman Brothers Band for a full show.
That's great
Just gonna
because I'm
throw
sure
that
he
one
had a
out there.
level of respect.
Well, yeah, but
Old ways though.
yeah, like you just don't get to sit in with the Allman Brothers for
Yeah.
a gig if you're a nobody.
Of course.
Yeah, like Gavin Rosdale's not fucking sitting in with the
Exactly.
Allman Brothers.
I'm not saying that Zach Wilde's better than
Bush.
We gotta go
I'm
back
not
to-
saying
I
that
know,
he's
I was gonna
better.
say that.
by any means. But that's the thing, though. Going back to the Rolling Stone list, I feel like the Rolling Stone list is a little skewed.
Well,
and
of course,
it's-
and the thing about
and-
it is when you debate guitarists like that, I don't so much debate them for the idea. Like sometimes, like the classic sense of a guitarist tends
Yes.
to weigh more heavily as opposed to like, all right, this guitarist is just better. But Dwayne Allman, I kind of separate him from like, you know, the classic acts of like Clapton, Jimmy Page, and because Dwayne Allman was just very like that's, you know, not many people really know of him like Jimmy Page.
Yeah, well, I
mean,
also feel like in that particular list, like people like Eric Clapton, Jimmy Page,
Yeah.
Dwayne Allman, they should be off. Like,
Yeah.
they should be in like a top, you know, a top level that doesn't count for the list, because then they have people like, I keep saying it, Kurt Cobain is higher on the list than Dimebag Darrell.
Makes
And
perfect sense. if
It
you
does
think about
not
it.
make perfect sense at all. Like that is just so
Dude,
like
Dimebag
fucked
Darrell's
up.
pretty one-dimensional as well. Like,
I don't
mean,
know
if that's
about
your
all that.
argument about Kurt Cobain, like,
I'm saying as far as an innovator and technique goes, Dimebag Darrell has Kurt Cobain hands down all day, every day.
what did he innovate?
What? Everything. Have you not ever listened to Pantera?
Yeah, they sound like a pretty typical metal band.
No.
Oh my God. Yeah. Please back me up on this one.
This is the one thing. Like I'll do Desert Island, Appetite, and Nevermind. I'm going Nevermind all day. But if this is the way I can see it. If I'm gonna pick a band and I have to choose a guitarist, but I'm thinking of the possibility of any genre of music to be able to have them play, I would choose Dime over Kurt any single day.
Kurt
Yes.
Cobain, like Nirvana, had way more of an evolution throughout their career than Pantera.
Dude, have you listened to power metal and then Far Beyond Driven?
I've
His
listened to
guitar
power metal.
quality is
Well, not
he just
even
got
that.
better
Listen to-
every single
Listen to
album,
Power
dude.
Metal versus like Damage Plan.
Even, yeah,
Like even
dude.
from Pantera to Damage Plan, there was a
Dude,
huge
just
evolution
even-
in his
even
music.
Do you
and
think
sound.
Damage Plan's better guitar playing than Pantera?
Well, I mean, it's Dimebag Darrell. It's all.
It's just different music.
Yeah, it's
structure.
different music.
But here's the thing: just
his-
the dynamic. If you think of like Bleach to Nevermind, there's obviously a jump there. But Power Metal to Cowboys from Hell,
God
Oh, that's
like
damn,
holy fuck, dude! I didn't even realize it was the same band.
it's
at one
literally
point.
night and
And
day.
it's not even just because Phil's not doing vocals; it's just quality of guitar work.
Well,
it's like I don't know
yeah.
what happened. How did he become that different? And within a couple years of albums,
But as far as
And
technique and
Justice for All.
what about it?
He's probably inspired by that. And
well,
Master
they
of
were
Puppets.
boys with Metallica.
But
Well,
yeah, but your
yeah, well,
talent
yeah, you're
level
hanging
doesn't
out with
just
Metallica.
change like that. That's the
Yeah.
If you're hanging out with
ability.
the Kirk Hammett and
No,
James
dude.
Hetfield all day,
Listen,
it
Sid
just
Vicious
might.
hung out with fucking Lemmy for God knows how long. Couldn't even play a fucking simple.
Yeah, that's because they
bass
weren't
line.
playing music together. They were getting fucked up together.
But
Yeah,
back to the Rolling Stone list. That's the reason why I say that the Rolling Stone list is garbage and it doesn't mean anything.
Listen, I'm not
because
gonna
it's just
deny-
it's so messed up.
I'm not going to deny though, like Kurt is actually a better guitarist than most people give him for because they think of how simple his songs are.
Yes.
Just the ability, his writing structure. But again, like for guitarist's sake, I mean, it's just that's what he did.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't.
Like it's on said list.
Kurt
like
Cobain's solos are hard to play
Kurt Cobain's higher on the list than Steve Vai or Joe Satriani
Yeah, I mean that's.
and John
because
Petrucci.
he's more influential.
No, it's not
Joe
influential guitar players.
Satriani
It's
took-
greatest.
To what like big
Satriani
bands
took-
that came after, really though.
Joe Satriani took jazz fusion and made it more mainstream. Yeah, and Steve Vai also, and
But they're kind of like their own thing. They didn't
Yeah.
inspire like masses and masses of people. Like you could even say that for Pantera. Like they did
Listen.
inspire.
Yeah,
a
but the
lot of
list
people,
isn't
but, like,
influential
That's
Joe
what I
guitar
was gonna
players.
say,
The list
yeah.
is
and
greatest.
John Petrucci, like, yeah, but that's all factored into greatest of all time. Like, it's not just ability. Like, if it was ability,
All right,
then
so-
the dudes from what was the metal band in like the mid 2000s with the crazy fast Dragon Force? They would be number one.
They're not even on the list.
Well, there you go. Like, that's why they don't do those things like
Well,
that.
that's the thing about that list. I think that's what people tend to look is they just immediately think like someone who can play guitar well, as opposed to what their music from their guitar work actually accomplished. I will say Nirvana, hands down, way more influential than Pantera. Pantera was influential in a different regard, but Nirvana just spawned the whole fucking level.
Yeah,
of
and
music
I'm not disagreeing with
Yeah.
that at all.
But I'm
It's
saying,
a-
like, if we narrowed the list down just to people as they can actually physically play the guitar.
You might as well call the list the 100 most magical guitar players of all time. What guitarists picked up the guitar and made the most magic with their instruments?
That's, yeah.
Yeah, I
In
would
that
agree
case,
with that.
I would agree
Yeah.
with that. But I'm saying, can you also agree if it came down to people that can physically play the guitar?
No, I don't think that has much to do with it at all.
What do you mean? Like, if
Like-
you sat down and you had to play guitar against Bill, you know what I mean? And then someone had to make a list to say who was the better guitarist. Not
Well, that's
like what you
different
cre-
because that's like a
But that's what I'm
that's
asking
like
you.
a
And-
guitar duel.
but I'm
That's
saying
not like analyzing a whole career.
But
to
I'm saying
like
the
come to a
ability, like I
decision.
said, if you had to pick a guitarist to play any genre of music, if it was going to be blues, if it was going to be jazz fusion, if it was going to be thrash metal, if it was going to be alternative, if it was going to be punk, any type of music played, which guitarist would you pick to be able to like accomplish at least being able to play any genre? Because they're just physically better to play the
probably Jimmy
instrument.
Page.
No, I'm saying between Dime and Kurt.
I think Eddie Van Halen could do all that stuff. I mean, no, it's,
We're
I
getting
think
way
No
off.
one's denying Eddie
We're
Van
getting
Halen.
He
way
had-
off
fucking
subject
damn
here.
no,
right.
he has the musical.
Unbelievable.
He has the musical,
I'm done.
technical musical background to do all that stuff.
Done.
That's all.
Unreal.
By the way, me and Michael get the same paychecks from Van Halen fuckers.
Unreal.
Get the same what?
Paychecks from Van Halen.
Anyway,
No, I'm kidding.
That was an Eddie mention, not a David mention.
all these different guitarists and music throughout the generations almost brings us to our next topic, our main topic. Bill, Steve,
Um,
Bill.
yeah, well, going back to the list, and you hear these top, 3 guitar players, top 5 guitar players, whatever, and you have like Robert Johnson, then you have Jimmy Page, and then you have Eric
Before you get to
Clapton,
Jimmy Page, Elvis in the 50s.
Elvis, Van Halen, and then Dimebag Darrell
Yeah.
and Kurt Cobain and
Nirvana
everything, and
to the
so on, so
90s.
on. How did these bands affect generations of people?
So let's, because we brought Michael on here, not to really
No,
put
no.
it in any regard. You're just an older gentleman compared
Yes.
to our generation class. Let's say that. We brought him on here for a level of expertise due to the fact that he lived in this era and was able to understand it better. But, I mean, let's start with like because I don't want to go back to like the 40s and the 30s with the jazz era and stuff like
Yeah.
that.
Right,
the
that
blues.
was-
Like
yeah.
we can go right to like the emergence with rock and roll starting with like the 50s when it really
Yeah,
started to
Elvis.
break.
Yeah,
That's why Elvis was called the king of rock and roll, because he's the one that kind of
yeah,
started it, because he came from the background in the South of black soul blues music and gospel music, and he put it together and created this thing that they started calling rock and roll. Jailhouse Rock,
Yeah.
Heartbreak, and that was like the beginnings of it. That's why he was called the king of rock and roll, because he kind of created. And then these other guys, Bill Haley and the Comets, Chuck Berry, they
Little
all
Richard.
Little Richard, they all started this style. They started playing this style of music, and it got, kids always want to rebel against their parents. It's always the teens rebelling against their parents, and this gives the kids something to use. Say, we like this music and our parents don't.
Yeah.
So we like this. And it's
That eccentric pelvis really
yes.
was causing rifts in major households in North America at the time.
So we're calling it the eccentric pelvis.
The eccentric pelvis.
And then
But the 50s was all about, was a
Rock
lot
and
about
roll.
Elvis.
Yeah.
In the beginning of rock and roll.
And it's just crazy too to think about it that now like Elvis is like considered like country western type music. You know what I mean? Like you'll hear Elvis on like a country station, and like it's very rarely now that he's like,
on a rock station.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
But it's just too like with that generation of like what it spawned with like that kind of like beatnik, greaser, blue collar environment,
Mhm.
and then you had music that was kind of like surrounding that time, and then that's what you start to see with each decade is kind of how this music spawns the idea of like the social constructs that were created as a result. I mean, you figure the type of music people were listening to were kind of dictating so and so the clique they were like a part of.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And then the cool thing about the 50s is, I mean, I think eventually I want to get down and see what everybody's favorite era of music was. So like when you go to the 60s is when like holy fuck, shit really like with the Beatles coming out,
Yeah.
that's really when things started to really
British
become
invasion.
yeah, like
British
music
invasion,
really became a prominent
Mhm.
sense. You know?
Well, I feel like that's when rock and roll like started to actually become rock and roll.
Yeah, that's when it became band.
yeah, like
Yeah.
Elvis, yeah, kind of gave the idea to somebody. It
Yeah.
almost seems, and then the Beatles took it and like gave a little bit to everybody, almost to create this.
And like
wave
the
of
Beach Boys
fucking-
over here.
Even so, yeah,
You know?
Doors.
The Doors,
Creedence.
Yep.
Creedence.
Oh yeah, Led Zeppelin at the end of the era.
I always felt like the American music was better than British music at any individual time.
But here's the
I
ironic
agree.
thing is like
Yeah.
the
I agree,
60s
definitely.
though. I think the 60s had, because of that British invasion, I think they kind of like overshadowed a lot of American bands that were coming out in the 60s. But the 70s is when like American music really started to take hold.
The 60s was probably one of the biggest decades for music because it had some of the biggest events. I mean, the Woodstock was
Well-
probably the biggest event ever, and it came at the end of the 60s,
Yeah.
and it brought the whole counterculture together and all the bands that were against the Vietnam War, and it was a way for younger people to protest against the establishment
Through the
They-
sound, yeah.
through the
Yeah.
music. Crosby, Stills, Nash Young did all the anti-war songs.
Well, that was like the biggest thing too about Jimi Hendrix playing the Star Spangled Banner.
Yep.
Like that was literally a message at that point.
And that was the last day of the
Yeah.
festival, and there was hardly
Yeah.
anybody left. That was a strange thing about that.
Well,
But it was Woodstock was the defining moment of the counterculture there, and then the '60s also had the psychedelic, the drug use,
yeah.
the Grateful Dead, Asbury and Hague, San Francisco, that whole American psychedelic. So it brought that whole counterculture came together, and it climaxed at Woodstock, and then Woodstock became the defining moment for that culture.
The Dead played great Woodstock, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
I just saw this thing where John Fogerty, like, I forget who the act was before him, but like it ran super. It was the Dead.
Oh, yeah.
They ran super late. They played for like 3 hours, and they were only supposed to play for like 45 minutes or something. And
Whoops, sorry, I forgot.
Yeah, the way
and
this-
by the time John Fogerty and Credence get on, it's like 4:00 in the morning.
Yeah,
and
most of the
everyone's
big
asleep.
big acts came on at like
Oh my
3 in the
God.
morning, 4 in the morning.
And
Jimi
he's
Hendrix
like,
played at 6 a.m.
it's all
You know,
dark.
it's like,
There's no
oh,
lights. I'm looking around,
Yeah.
and I'm like, I'm like looking at the band, like, should we keep playing? And then like some guy in the audience must have seen me, like looking unsure about the whole thing. And he's like, "Don't worry about it, John. Just keep going." And he was like,
Yeah.
"I played the whole show for him."
Yeah, the Dead
That's so
played.
funny.
The Dead played on the second day. After them came Creedence, and then Janis Joplin, and then after that, Sly and the Family Stone, then the Who, and then Jefferson Airplane closed
Oh,
that
that's right.
night
The
out.
Who was at Woodstock too.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's crazy. They were playing early as fuck, dude. They played overnight. I mean, because
Yeah,
Grateful
these kept
Dead
going.
played 10:30 p.m. to 12:05. Creedence came on at midnight to 1:20.
They don't
The
do
last
shit
band that came out,
No.
Jefferson Airplane, came on at 8 a.m. to 9:40 a.m. So they literally played. The day started at 12:30 p.m. They didn't play the last concert until 8 a.m. the following
But then
morning.
when did day 3 start?
Day 3 started at 2 p.m. So it went from 8 a.m. to 9:40 a.m. And then Joe Cocker and the Grease Band came on at 2 p.m.
Oh my
So
god!
there was like a
it was almost like
5-hour gap.
nonstop music.
Non-stop,
That would suck to play
dude.
first in the
Oh
day
my
at a
God.
concert like that.
That
Do you imagine just like, because like they're just constant, so you don't even get like that day to go back to your hotel like they do now with festivals, like
Oh,
days
yeah.
in
You're
between,
stuck at
and you're like
Woodstock.
coming down off acid, about to take another dab, and you're just like sitting there like with a 5-hour break and more music's coming on. You're just like on a muddy hill and upstate New York. That's just crazy. But that's the thing. That was the difference with music in the 60s. There was
Yeah.
like a level
Everybody
of
came
like
together.
you were just there.
Yeah,
It was
everybody
just-
was. It was an
yeah.
event. Everybody was there. Everybody was
Oh,
helping
my
each other.
God.
It was just, they were trying to feed everybody. They were trying to get everybody water. They were flying stuff in, medical treatment.
Well, I mean, yeah, they didn't expect any of that
No.
to happen.
driving bread trucks in.
Yeah. And then, because of that, like at the end of the 60s with the war, I mean, carrying over into the 70s, like some of the bands that were started established then and even developed like more genre changing. The 70s was also the beginning of a culture of music.
Yeah, if you will.
The
Like the-
70s was more. I think it was more of where the bands started. I guess the record companies started to take control.
But wasn't that also like hugely the disco scene?
That was at the end of the 70s.
Yeah.
The early 70s, the bands were becoming popular on their own, but the music, but the people were being kind of fed. If you were a band and you wanted to do an album and you were under contract with a record company, the record company would say, okay, you have to, one of the songs you put on this album has to be something we can release as a single. And so the 70s kind of created this, every album had a single, and they had your album cuts.
Yeah.
You had your deep cuts, and then you had your single.
AOR.
That's what I wrote here. AOR, album oriented rock. That's when the FM radio stations started coming out.
Mm-hmm.
They could play the deep cuts on the albums while the AM radio played
Must
the
have been
hits.
nice.
Yeah, so it was that kind of things. But music kind of went more mainstream, I think, in the 70s.
Yeah.
So people became more. People were exposed to more bands because they heard the hits
Yeah.
from these bands.
And you heard bands like
Bruce
Queen for
Springsteen,
the first time and stuff like that.
Yeah, Bruce Springsteen became popular. He had a lot of hits. But he also had deep cuts. Aerosmith the same way.
Yeah.
They had some, their hits, but then they had their deep cuts, which were
Fleetwood
really.
Mac.
Fleetwood
Mhm.
Mac.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
All these bands came out in the 70s, and they all became superstars.
Yeah.
But then along comes disco, and
Yeah.
kind of like, it's no longer about the bands. It's about the music and the people dancing and the people
Even Kiss went
becoming
disco.
a part of it.
Yeah, I think it's funny because when you mentioned the disco scene coming at the tail end of the 70s, right? I think like during the 70s is like that first time where like every decade had a genre of music that spawned and was like almost a mistake.
Yeah.
Because then you go into the 80s and, the disco scene comes crashing down. Like I forget what baseball field it was at when they did that huge thing where they're blowing up
Burned
all the
the
records.
shit, yeah.
Where they're blowing up all the records, and that was
disco
supposed to like
records, yeah.
solidify that like disco's dead.
Yeah.
But then the 80s come, and you figure the early 80s, I mean, you have some of the bands from the 70s still releasing some good work, and then you're having the spawn of like the metal scene, the punk scene, but then you also have the stain of like the hair metal scene, which was like
Yeah.
the disco of the 70s, like
Well, the 80s was more of the second British invasion. Where
yeah,
all these,
because when
yeah.
all
Iron
these new
Maiden's
wave, all
coming
these
big, you know what I
electric
mean?
pop, all these bands came over from
Diamond
England
Head,
again with these hits and
Yeah.
this electronic music,
the
and
Sex Pistols,
Judas
Yeah.
And that-
Judas
Judas
Priest.
Priest, yep,
that
Pretty similar to
influenced
disco.
that influenced the kids. The kids started dressing.
Def Leppard.
Def Leppard.
I mean, if you were to think of a band that would define the 80s really in a nutshell, Def Leppard might be one of those bands.
The 80s,
Yeah. I
Yeah.
would agree with that. Like if you're talking about like mainstream radio in the
Yeah.
80s, like
Def Leppard is
Leppard's
that
pretty
band.
crystallized.
Like you think of like High and Dry, Pyromania,
Well, I was going to say
Hysteria.
Pyromania and Hysteria, especially.
maybe
Dude,
even like
Hysteria.
Tom Petty,
Yeah.
Well, dude, think about Guns N' Roses.
like Refugee or something.
Yeah, but the thing is, Guns N' Roses, though, didn't come out until the later 80s. Well,
But I'm
when did
saying when
Appetite
you
come out?
define-
88?
But I'm
Yeah.
saying, like, if you think about
Yeah.
the early 80s, right? And then you think of all the bands that came as a result and then how it hit towards the tail end, that those bands made more of an impact on the later end, picking up the pieces of what other musicians weren't doing. And
Yeah, I
they
guess
kind of
so.
left a more gravity towards it. Like, yeah, in the early 80s and probably the 80s itself,
Mm.
Def Leppard's on the radio all the time.
Yeah.
The biggest thing of the 80s was MTV.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
MTV
that's-
changed music. MTV. I remember the first broadcast of MTV in
great.
1982.
Yeah.
Video killed the radio star, and all of a
Yeah.
sudden, and the first videos they had 6 videos. That's all they had. They
Yeah.
played them over and over
So
again,
you figure the
and you would just
exposure
sit there and
started,
watch
yeah.
them because you could actually see the bands playing. So
It's
most
like
of the
live,
first
yeah.
most of the first group of videos that came out on MTV for the first couple of years were just the bands playing and the people filming them.
Yeah.
And then along
Mhm.
comes Michael Jackson and creates Thriller.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, God,
It
okay.
takes the whole video thing to another level.
Yeah.
That was
Now
a movie.
video-
That first one was like
now
what,
the videos-
16 minutes. The
Yeah.
first original release of that video.
So now when a band puts out a video after Michael Jackson's Thriller, they have to get a director
Yeah.
and they have to make a story about it and make it like a mini movie.
Mhm.
So it just became this multimedia explosion.
How
with
stupid
MTV.
did David Lee Roth feel directing Jump the same
Jesus
time that
Christ.
Thriller came out?
Stop, dude. That's a mark on the 80s that we don't want to ever talk about.
I
Yeah.
like Jump.
It's such a
I
bad
think
song,
1984 had better songs than Jump.
Of
dude.
course.
I do have to ask
Panama.
Mike a question though.
Yeah.
Mike, if you don't mind me asking, how old were you? Let's say in like
59.
1982.
82, I was 22.
So you were like in your prime there in the 80s. Now I
Yeah,
want to ask you,
I was
like,
playing full time then.
okay, so I want to ask you, because now MTV is coming out and the exposure starting to happen where people are getting to start to see these artists even if they're not seeing them live, because you figure live music was like really your only opportunity.
Right.
Did you start to see like people changing like what they were wearing and like the groups, how they were like starting like in the and like personalities change and like
The second wave of the British invasion, the second British invasion with all the punk rock and new wave, people started dressing like, these people that they saw on
the
MTV.
leather jackets?
All the women dressed like
Madonna.
Pat Benatar, Madonna.
Yeah.
All the girls were dressed like that. The MTV brought it out so they could actually see it and they would imitate it.
That's
That's
interesting
how it
if you think
influenced
about
the
that.
pop culture. And when we would play live after MTV came out, every time we would play live during the breaks, they would play MTV videos on the video screens, and everybody would just stop and watch the
Just
video
watch the
screens
TV, yeah.
during the whole breaks when we were on break, and then we come back on and they watch us, and then they go back. It captured everybody's attention because
Yeah,
it was
exactly.
something new,
Screen.
and you can actually see the performers that they used to listen to on the
Yes.
radio.
It actually kind of makes you wonder on whether or not MTV was like a government type thing to keep people amused and to like keep people
I'm
like
sure they were
you know,
involved.
in
Well, you think
line.
about
to
that
some
now,
you know,
and then
extent.
so as we progress to the
Mhm.
90s,
Yeah, that
I
is-
mean, that's the same thing because then
Yeah.
that's the attitude that starts to get displayed, that kind of like more resistant through as opposed to just like irrational cause.
Mhm.
Now everyone's starting to see like
Well,
the
what's
strings
What's the most
attached.
famous video of the 90s?
Yeah, Bill. It's the most famous video of the
Smells Like
90s,
Teen
Bill.
Spirit?
There it is.
Yeah.
What was
How-
that?
how
What's the
popular were the-
concept of that video?
How would popular have
Anarchy.
Nirvana been without MTV? With
Not
just the music.
nearly as popular.
No.
That
Well, you
video
think-
made the whole image.
It became
for them.
part of your whole.
Well-
After MTV came out, it became. If you were a band, videos became part of your marketing strategy. It was no longer
Yes.
just making an album. You needed to make videos.
Well, and Nirvana set a good template for "Smells Like Teen Spirit"
Mm-hmm.
because it's just a live video with little things
Yeah.
peppered in,
It's well directed.
Yeah.
It's
and
a well directed
it's
video.
an
went
easy
a
video to
long way.
make, but it's
Mhm.
well done. And then a lot of the bands in the '90s kind of like took a step back from like big production like videos like Thriller or something.
Yeah.
Well, it's
and they
cool in a
streamlined
sense
it.
because you figure the generation that's appealing to what's the millennial generation from 86
to 95.
to 95?
Generation X.
Yeah. So you have, obviously kids of not of certain age. Like I was born in 91. So obviously when Nevermind drops, it's not groundbreaking as I'm a fetus essentially.
It changed the whole.
Um,
It changed the whole.
But yeah, you figure kids in
Same
that
for
age
us.
group, that was
Yeah.
like something to like hold on to,
Yeah.
relate to, and get this type of like, feeling of the oppression of being like a young adult in, modern America in the 90s where things are starting to become more corporate. Things are starting to become a little more difficult in like the work field, and like that peace love environment is slowly becoming grayer and darker.
grunge bands all hated hippies. yeah.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. And also too, there's another thing with like the change of dress. You go back to this like more blue collar thrift store, and that's all based on the image
Yeah.
that was portrayed in those music
Well,
videos.
that's
Well,
the
up
thing.
until the
Flannel.
80s, like the late 70s, everybody wore flannel still.
yeah.
That
Well,
wasn't
then the glam
grunge,
scene came out and like
and knocked it all
you
out.
got dudes
Well,
like teasing their hair.
It's
and
like I
wearing
said before on another
mascara.
episode. It's almost like when grunge came out, it was music by the people for the people. It was
Yeah.
like basically like a second.
DIY.
Yeah, it was basically a second coming of like Bruce Springsteen,
Or
if you
punk
will.
or something.
Yeah,
Punk,
exactly.
yeah.
Like these are regular ass people writing music for other regular ass people.
And it's cool too because Kurt's a lot of his influences were like older punk bands of the
Yeah.
like mid late 80s, and that's the
You know?
thing. He kind of took that sound and make it like almost more tolerable for
Beatled-
like the
he
early
beatled it
easy
up.
listener. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
exactly.
And it's funny because it really wasn't intentional on his part, and that's why like I hold Kurt to such high standards because he was writing music with nothing to really go on to like create afterwards. Because then you figure
Yeah.
some of the alternative acts that come out later in the 90s, they're going off the template now set by an artist the same way the Beatles set a template for
Yeah.
generations to come.
Yeah, exactly.
And so that's why when people hear about Nirvana and they don't know them and their first explanation is like they changed music, some people don't really understand what that even fucking means,
Yeah.
you know? And, you get to the tail end of the 90s, you go into the 2000s, and then that hip hop scene like reemerges.
Which, yeah, it's been building since the 80s.
Yeah.
And the 70s even. And then like going back to the 90s for a second, like with the step back that grunge was, like the reaction to like the kind of commercialized MTV culture of the 80s. Rap was the same way in the
Oh,
beginning.
yeah.
It was it was punk for inner city
It was
kids.
literally taking
Yeah.
the circumstances of current environment and literally putting it to music for people to relate to.
Well, you know, when you get to
Yeah.
the bottom of it, it's almost like real recognizes real.
Yeah.
Like,
Essentially, yeah.
you know, like, why is Bruce Springsteen one of the most decorated artists of all time?
Well,
I mean,
when he came out, he was unparalleled in his realness.
exactly,
Yeah.
He relates to the
exactly.
everyday person.
Exactly. And I think that, you know, like with the 80s and, you know, like the whole like glam thing and everything, I think that's why that scene kind of died out after a while.
Yeah.
And why it was so short lived in the 80s is because not everyone's going out doing blow and fucking groupies every night.
Yeah, nobody's flying on private jets sipping champagne
Exactly.
with like, you know,
Like,
gold straws to sniff your cocaine
you know,
with. Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. Not everyone can relate to Vince Neil's, you know, Home Sweet Home.
Well, and by the end of the 90s, the 80s struck back, and way more commercialized music was back in vogue. People started dressing more lavishly again. I feel like
We're
by
talking
the
about the end of the
early
90s?
2000s,
Oh,
style
yeah.
was way
Well,
less.
because that's what I'm saying. That rap scene, it's
minimalist.
weird. If you figure when we grew up, when like Get Rich or Die Trying came out,
Yeah.
Everyone
now
was
you're
wearing, yeah,
starting to have these
expensive
artists that are
jerseys.
rapping
Yeah.
about money and stuff, but it's not at the level that we see today. But that's
Yeah.
the direction that's heading.
Remember when
And-
fitted hats were like
Bro,
all
you
the
know how
fucking
many
rage?
you know how many new era 5950 hats I had? $30 a piece. And my head wasn't even a full size yet. So I'm buying all these fitted fucking hats that don't even fit me in a couple months. My father was livid. I remember playing basketball. I had to have every new pair of Iversons because I saw some rapper wearing them and I liked Allen Iverson. You know, like everything was
AI.
based on culture.
AI3.
Yeah, dude. And I remember when like Get Rich or Die Trying came out, especially that album, because I just remember seeing like 21 Questions on MTV
Yeah.
in the club. You know what I mean, on MTV.
21 Questions is underrated.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, 21 Questions is good.
Fuck
Yeah.
yeah.
50
And
Cent
also-
50 Cent loses a lot of like votes
Well,
from
because
people.
of the later era of 50
Yeah.
Cent that we experienced.
The changes in technology also had a big change on
The
culture.
LimeWire era.
all of a sudden. You had to go out and buy an album, or you had to go out and buy a
Yeah.
CD, or you had a cassette tape. Then all of a sudden you could start downloading music,
Oh yeah.
and
Yeah.
you get whatever song you wanted whenever you wanted. So now you could record a song and have it on iTunes the next day.
Yeah.
It didn't take 6 months to get from writing a song to get it out to the people. The
And-
internet changed everything.
It's really sad too, because that's kind of like the world we live in, like, you know, I want it now type attitude,
Mhm.
and everything's just expected to be there. You figure you see an artist that's playing, you can just go right on your StubHub app, and I've mentioned it before, just click and order a ticket.
Yep.
As opposed to, like I mentioned, you know, in an earlier episode, that idea in like Dazed and Confused, where they're going to get Aerosmith tickets, and it's like an event to go
Yeah.
drive to go get, like that. That's the thing about music, like it's just in the moment type feeling, and some people lose that, because you know how many people I go to shows and they spend maybe 80% of the time fucking filming the thing on their
Yeah.
phone.
Yeah.
Like, did you even pay attention? Have you ever listened to it?
Um,
Because then you go back and just watch it on your phone.
Yeah, you could've
I'm not
done
gonna
that
lie.
with stories.
I'm
Yeah.
guilty of that to an extent. Like I get like one song,
One song.
but I get like one song that like I sort of kind of don't care about.
Yeah, I mean, I'll even see. This is the thing. Like, I'll film a certain song if I enjoy it, maybe for 30 seconds, just so
Yeah.
I can go back and relive that moment for a period of time. But then you have the people that are videotaping whole. Like, I remember, and I'm not going to mention his name. We happened to go to a same concert simultaneously. I'm not going to even mention the band to give it away. It's fairly recent, but the individual posted a song.
What's the first letter of the band's name?
F.
Okay. Go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead.
Saw him. I think it was February. I saw him at the Wells Fargo. We're not going to talk about it. Anyway, this individual that happened to be at the show at the same time posted a live posted a live video of the band playing. Yeah, this individual posted a live video of the band playing while he was still at the show. So that means like you're videotaping, going on social media, and literally posting about something that you're there in the moment to enjoy.
Yeah.
You spent money to see this. It's like, why do you care if
I'm
everybody
also
else?
guilty of that too.
But it's like it's
I never film when I'm at concerts.
That's the
You can
problem
always
with
just
what
go
I'm
on
saying.
YouTube and
Well,
and
exactly.
find
what
someone
I
else
did
who filmed
was
it.
when we saw Lamb of God,
yeah.
I had my phone and like I saw like
So let me
what
ask you this.
position it would be. Then I put Facebook Live on and I just live streamed the
But
concert.
that's different. This was like a physical post. That means it was videotaped.
Yeah,
saved,
I didn't make
posted,
physical
like,
posts.
and I think that's why Facebook Live came out, for the idea that you don't have to take yourself out of the moment. So they're trying to figure out easier ways for this millennial concept of streaming and social media and everything. And that's the thing. Like I'm not even gonna lie. Like I'm on Facebook way too much. I'm on Instagram way too much. But when those moments, like for music, I mean, you lost the idea of like how fun it was to go get tapes and vinyls and CDs even just the dangers of being on LimeWire and FrostWire and giving your parents computer aids, like those little things. Now it's like you have your phone, you have Spotify, you have Apple Music, you have YouTube.
Yeah.
And then when you actually go to a concert and you're still in the same mindset of just like, are you even there?
Yeah,
Like, are
exactly.
you even hearing these songs? It's really sad. And that's the idea of like what music has evolved to, because then even the newer artists today, what they talk about, what their lyrical content is.
Well, it's like we've talked about that before too. Like rappers talking about money they don't have and cars that they don't drive and houses that they don't own. It just goes back to the whole real recognizes real thing.
I just remember back in the 70s, I don't know how many nights I spent sleeping in the parking lot at the Spectrum to wait for the next morning for tickets to go on sale.
Yeah.
For Yes or for Genesis or for
Pink Floyd.
whatever. I slept in the parking lot and got up in the early next and got in the front of the line to get tickets.
Yeah.
And even when they had that first JFK show at it was Yes and Peter Frampton and Jay Giles. It was the first out there. We actually went there the night before the concert and spent the night outside JFK Stadium just hanging out because they opened the doors at like 9 a.m. And the next morning, this band started playing at noon.
Now Philadelphia is
was
entirely too dangerous for that.
It was just the whole experience. You had the whole experience of waiting for the tickets, going to buy them, holding the tickets, waiting for the show, going to the concert with the ticket, watching there was none of this, and it was a whole experience from beginning to end.
It's
I
just,
still a lot of time go to the box office to buy my tickets.
Yeah. Well, see, that's the thing about you, Connor. You really do still carry that like earlier vibe. Like you still listen to CDs. You go out and buy albums. And even when I used to fucking CD shop with both you and Bill, it would be like I had these songs downloaded, but I went out and bought the album. Like I'd rather listen to the CD. I'd rather listen to the vinyl.
CDs are better than the digital
It's just,
files.
but there's something about it, like owning the physical copy.
They get a lot louder.
Like even my tickets, I don't even like to just have them on my phone to scan. I like to have the ticket stub. Like it's just memories you create. And the sad thing is, it's like the world we live in. They literally have a thing called nomophobia, where it's you have a fear of not having your mobile device on you. And you picture this is what the world has become today. That even when you're sitting there, it's like you like Bill. You mentioned it. I mean, you felt some weird obligation in the moment to film a band. Facebook Live, it like that just came natural to you.
Yeah.
But there was a point in time, bro, when we were rocking Nokia whatevers. Bullshit phones in the early 90s.
When I had an LG flip phone without a camera.
Shit, even like, with the Envy Touch and the sidekicks and stuff. Like, if you were at a concert, you didn't have that inclination to, like, go out and pull your phone out and go on. Facebook didn't even exist.
I think more or less with me doing stuff like that, it's for people that either A, didn't know that concert was happening, or B, I just want to show you how interesting I am because I'm seeing a band called Lamb of God.
Look at me. I'm looking at Lamb of God right now while you're working at Wendy's.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean?
Look at how close I am to Randy.
Yeah. And that's the thing.
He could see
Everything's
me.
coming more about like public image. And I think a lot of that stems from, again, with the type of music. Like when you see Cardi B up there rapping about like, I'm a bad bitch type attitude. And then you got all these girls trying to act like
hood rats.
You know what I mean? And it's just the kids that are developed. Like I'm like watching videos of like 4-year-old girls twerking. I'm like,
yeah.
I remember it was a viral video. It was a dad dancing with his daughter, and his daughter started twerking, and he just had this like horrified look. But it's like, where did you learn that from?
Exactly.
You know?
Now, it can help also. I mean, the bands that I play in, when we play live, people videotape us, put it on YouTube, and it's actually good for us.
But that's the way you get exposure today.
That's
is no
the
more
way
MTV.
We get exposure.
Yeah.
People want to say, well, what's your band like? Well, here's here's this YouTube clip. Come
Yeah.
see us, and they watch
Yeah,
YouTube
exactly.
clip and they
Double-edged
come see the
sword.
band. So it can work both ways if it's used properly.
Yeah.
And you don't have to bring someone yourself to film it.
No,
Yeah.
and so it's actually I didn't realize how many. I look on YouTube and go, somebody taped us there, somebody videos us there. I can see all these videos of the band playing. I can hear how we sound and how we look, and so there's still some good to it if it's done the right way. It's not overused. If you're not doing it just to show, hey, I'm here.
Yeah.
I'm here. I'm at the Billy Joel
Well,
concert.
some
Look.
it's different. Like if you're going to see a
Yeah.
band like that's notorious, like already well known,
Yeah.
a lot of people film.
National
But another
action.
thing is, it's like the double-edged sword sense. Because let's say you're sitting there performing, you're an up-and-coming band, and all of a sudden someone catches you on film, like in the bathroom sniffing coke.
Right.
You know, like because everybody has cameras on them at all times.
Yeah.
So then it's like artists today are like watching their every move because you'll see stuff on TMZ or whatever, and like just little locations of like some famous person doing some bullshit because
Yep.
some guy happened to have his iPhone on him, and like
Yeah.
90% of people have technology on them at all times.
If they had cell phones in the 80s, the entire
Holy
the
shit!
entire band I was in would have been in jail.
Allegedly
Allegedly.
committed.
If they had
some-
phones in
nefarious
2008, we'd all
behaviors.
be in jail.
We would all
This is very
we
true.
would have all
Allegedly
been in.
have
Wait a second.
phones.
We would
Yeah,
all
we
been in.
tell you.
If we had computers in our pockets.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We would have all been indicted. Sorry.
Damn.
We're gonna have to cut that
Yeah,
out.
coming crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it wouldn't make sense. Then Mike looks like a weirdo saying addicted because that never happened apparently.
Okay, sorry. We have all been indicted.
Yes.
No, it's-
Yes, indeed.
but no, if there were cell phones back in the 70s and 80s.
So-
Maybe if we had socialized education in this country. No.
So roundabout, just to kind of like, you know, kind of come to a general consensus. You know, everybody always jokes like, I was born in the wrong era.
Mhm.
Like if you could grow up and like this is saying if you were born in the 50s, like the prime would have been the late 60s, 70s. Like if you could just be in
Okay.
your prime in any decade of music, which would you choose? We'll start with Bill.
80s.
80s?
Yep.
Connor?
90s.
So you would like been like, because you're born in the 90s. So
Yeah,
you would
but
have
I
been like in
would
your
have been maybe
prime
like
in the
18 years
Yeah.
earlier or something.
Yeah, you'd have liked to have been, a
Yeah.
young adult
Like
in the
18
90s.
when I was
Yeah.
born or something.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or no, maybe like 18 to 91.
Yeah.
A little better.
Music wise, I mean, just for the generation, I would have picked the 50s because I like that whole greaser look. But music wise, the 90s, absolutely.
Mhm.
Just because of the bands that you could have seen live at that point in time. Phew.
I would.
If we're talking non-music, I go back to like 1900.
Well, yeah, I mean, go back to fucking
Y'all like computers?
1500 AD. Yeah, right.
I would love to go back with the knowledge I have now to the 80s and be like, listen,
Dude,
they
hey, I would like
invest in this
to
thing called Apple.
Back to the Future getting the sports almanac.
Yeah,
I just
exactly. I'd
appreciate
do that.
enough, you know. But no, yeah, the 90s for music, definitely.
I like it just the way where I was born. I was born in 1960 and I grew up in the
So, yeah,
70s.
you got to see.
And that was, no other decade for me really. I
Yeah.
got to see all the
Yeah.
really cool bands.
Now, you say born in the 60s. Would you have maybe preferred it born in like the 50s to see the bands in their 60s more so like as an adult?
Yeah, maybe
like
5
older?
years earlier.
Yeah, just like a smidge.
Yeah, just a little bit earlier, so I could have seen more of the early progressive rock of the late 60s.
Yeah.
When Pink Floyd first came out, when Genesis first came out, yes. ELP, when they first came out in the late 60s.
Yeah.
I got to see them in the 70s when they were past, when they reached the peak, but I still got to see them and they were still, I saw Rush in their heydays in the early 80s. So I think where I was pretty good where I
Imagine
was.
seeing, what was it, the Pompeii show? Was
Oh,
that the
Yeah.
Pink Floyd. Yeah,
Pink
that
Floyd.
was in the,
holy fuck.
that was
Mhm.
before Dark Side of the Moon. That
Yeah,
was in
could
the-
you imagine seeing that type of stuff,
Yeah.
like Pink Floyd in their prime live?
That'd be
Even just
cool.
like after Sid Barrett, sadly, but like Pink Floyd after Sid Barrett obviously evolved to a different species at that point. But just
Yeah.
that era of music,
I'd probably take Pink Floyd on the Wall tour.
yeah.
If I could go see any tour, I'd probably go back to
I
like,
would take them on,
1981.
to be honest. Yeah, the
Yeah.
Wall tour because you would see so much. But like even for me, like the Animals tour because then you have Dark Side and you have
Animals is second,
Obscure.
Yeah.
Yeah, Obscure by Clouds is out as well. Dark Side and then Animal. Oh yeah, that just would have been.
Yeah, I think they were at Veterans Stadium actually when they did that tour. They did
Oh
that
wow,
big
the
outdoor
Vet.
tour.
Yeah, my dad was at that. Yeah.
No way.
Yep.
Your dad was at the Animals tour at the Vet.
No, I'm sorry. He was at the Wall tour at the Vet.
At the Vet.
All I know is they did it at the vet so they could use the lasers
Mhm.
Yeah.
and the whole big thing.
Well, they were
that
one of
Pink
those
Floyd was-
bands that really, yeah. said,
I
like,
think he
a
tried
tone.
to get tickets for the Animals tour and something went wrong.
That's fucking awesome though.
But he saw him on
Got
the
the
wall
wall
tour. Yeah.
Well, this kind of brings it into the film that we suggested for you guys to watch last week, which was It Might Get Loud.
Might
And
get high pitched on YouTube.
yeah, allegedly.
Yeah, there may be or may not be, can't
You may
confirm or
not be able to
deny, a
tell who's
shitty
talking.
fucking version of this film for.
It's like a third of the
Nothing.
screen, and then it shows you like a fake movie theater.
It looks like it looks like a video of just a movie theater, and on the movie theater screen within the screen of your screen is the movie.
It looks like the projectionist is like filming the bootlegger.
Yeah, yeah. It's like someone is.
He's
It's
filming the bootlegger filming.
yeah.
the,
It's like
Yeah.
someone bootlegging
And then
someone's
corrected-
bootleg.
Yeah.
And then destroyed the pitch.
Yeah, like those cameras where like the little screen flips out the side that you used
Yeah.
to put the little VHS cassette in. It
Yep.
looks like someone's filming
yeah.
that camera
Yeah.
while someone's filming the actual movie.
That's
was-
funny. My buddy that watched it on the fire, the water twig.
To hit the water,
Water
twig.
twig?
Yeah,
Yeah,
the water twig in the Lodi. That you
Yeah,
plug
the
into your
Lodi.
TV.
yeah, the
Never
water
heard of
twig.
it.
You can plug this thing called a water twig into your phone.
Water and phones don't mix.
Well,
Into your TV.
Or TV.
The water twig.
electronics.
we'll tell you about this water twig later.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Anyways, one of my buddies saw it on said device and
off the Lodi.
yeah, off the Lodi,
Yeah.
and it was pretty good by what I've heard. It Might Get Loud. It's actually a strange type of concept of a movie. It's 3 different guitar players from 3 different generations, one being Jimmy Page from Led Zeppelin, and the other one being The Edge from U2, one of Steve's favorite bands of all time. And the third and final guitar player is Jack White from White Stripes and Rock on Tours fame. It's basically a documentary about these 3 sitting in a room together and discussing the guitar, discussing influences, discussing what they do with their instruments. Just an all around. It's almost like what you guys listen to every week.
It was good.
Famous.
I liked it, but it's almost like what you said earlier before. It's like I thought like
There wasn't enough
there
Jimmy
wasn't
Page.
I
enough
was
Jimmy
expecting,
Page,
yeah.
and then I honestly like I'm really not a U2 fan, and like
Yeah.
the Edge is like kind of a boring guitar player because he
I
doesn't
agree.
show you what he's doing with the foot pedals or anything.
You just know he clicks
he just
it. and
he
it's
just shows
there.
you
Yeah, he
what I'm
didn't even
actually
show
playing is
you,
really
yeah.
stupid. But when I hit a bunch of these mystery pedals,
And then he
it
didn't
sounds
show
great.
you like the post production of what he actually made that sound like, which
Exactly.
was weird. Like he
And
just
then-
showed
yeah.
you how simple the riff was. And
Jack White is all right, but
this movie
he's
really
not one of my favorites. And
this
he
movie just-
personally
yeah,
is
yeah.
kind of
They
I
dropped
think-
the ball.
I think that the thing, Jack White, right?
Yeah.
He came into this. He was driving to the show, saying probably going to get into a fight and this.
yeah.
It sounds like he didn't have respect for the other 2 guitarists.
Exactly.
But by the end of the
Which for
show,
the Edge is understandable.
by the end of the show, he's looking at these guys, going, "Oh my God, these guys, Jimmy Page, this guy's a guitar god." And he got respect for these guys once
Yeah.
he spent time with them,
Yep.
and realized like, man, everybody's been influenced by these guys, and
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
even though I wasn't, I was more influenced by these blues players. These guys are like, guitar gods.
Yeah,
And
but even so, though, Jack
became-
White has to respect who Jimmy Page is. I mean, The Edge, I can understand. Not everybody likes you too. It's
I think
not
by
really
the end,
I
I
saw
think by
Jack
the end he
White.
did.
Yeah, yeah, but I mean, like
think
even
walking
going
into
into
it,
it,
walking into it, I think he was a little.
like honestly, when he said that, I'm like, this dude's a jerk off.
Yeah, dude,
Yeah.
I
It was the
I
first
saw
thing I
Jack
thought of.
White get a little like
Humbled.
humbled by
Yeah.
Jimmy Page a couple
Yeah,
times.
yeah.
Yeah.
It was
where-
funny, yeah, because the segments you got to see Jack by himself, he was kind of like,
A dick.
yeah, he was that trendy hipster, like
Yeah.
I like this
Mhm.
shit because nobody else does type attitude. But
Exactly.
then you got to do there was that scene where he was playing was it a Whole Lot of Love
Yeah,
Yeah.
or Heartbreaker?
it was Whole Lot of Love.
Whole lot, yeah, it was Whole Lot.
And he was
of
like
Love.
just staring.
Yeah,
And he was like, "Oh my
and
god!"
even-
Like you saw
even
the
the Edge,
smile
like,
on
they
his face
both-
and stuff.
Yeah,
Playing
they
Heartbreaker with
both
Jimmy
were-
Page.
Yeah.
I'm playing a whole lot of love with Jimmy Page. Oh my god.
Yeah, they were both at that
Jeez.
point in time, and like you got to actually see Jack White sincerely look struck by that moment to know like he's in the presence of literally history at this moment. I
Yeah,
mean,
exactly. Like honestly, who else could you say you could be in a room with and have them do the thing that they do for like if you were in a room with Jimmy Page and he was like, "Hey,
Yeah.
come on, Steve, play Hold On Love with me." What would you do? You'd fucking shit your pants.
Yeah, I would definitely have to leave because
You'd be
I shit
like,
my pants. yeah.
I'm sorry, Mr. Page. I can't seem to play right
I can
now.
picture
I can't feel
it
my
perfectly.
hands.
My voice would crack because I was like very intimidated and wouldn't be prepared. My throat would be dry, so I would crack my voice, and at the same time, I would probably let out this like weird nervous fart, and it would be like a whole. I could see the moment. It's like one of those moments that you wait for your whole life, and then you're like thinking about it 6 years later of how you fucked it up.
It'd be like the
Like those are the things that would keep me up at night. Like, wow, like I just sounded
Was
like
that the
12 and I
fart?
farted in front of Jimmy Page by accident. I'll never live this down.
Wafting.
Yeah.
excuse me, was that the fart?
Yeah, it would be like and it would be like it would be like the one from Step Brothers that just goes
Yeah.
on forever. It's like ketchup and onion. I could
Jimmy
taste it.
Page is just like, how dare you pass wind before me?
And Jimmy Page is so cool about it. He's just cool.
Yeah,
You know,
And like you can see him when he was playing, like he just had this like swag to
yeah,
him
the-
that he
the-
still
yeah,
has
the
after
swagger.
all these years.
Yeah, the swagger and just the he wasn't technically the greatest guitar player, but he just
He was a
had
riff
that
master.
look and the feel. And when he plays,
Yeah.
like, yeah, that's Jimmy Page.
I don't know if he ever did it, Michael, but if you go on YouTube and you just type in "It Might Get Loud," there's a lot of outtakes
Okay.
and deleted scenes from that movie. Like we were watching before we started, like if like Jimmy Page teaching them how to play like Kashmir and stuff like that, and Jack White teaching them Seven Nation Army, and the Edge teaching them how to play.
They should have showed that stuff.
Yeah, they really
The
should
best
have.
parts were the performances and when they were actually playing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, then again, I think if they were to put out everything they filmed that day, the movie would probably be like fucking 10 hours long.
Oh, yeah.
Jack
Like, could you
White
imagine
also
how long
talked
they-
way too much.
Yeah, like it was
The
almost
whole
just like
movie was like Jack White.
It
it was like
very
shut the
weird,
fuck
'cause
up.
even
I
the
want to hear
Edge-
what Jimmy Page has to say.
And it's weird because in stardom sense, even the Edge, I would put, and I don't like you two, but the Edge is just because of the success of you
He's more
two,
famous.
Yeah,
way more
100%.
famous than Jack
Yeah.
White. Like that was almost like a Jack White movie featuring the Edge
It
and
was
Which
like-
Jimmy
I still
Page
don't
in
get
that order.
though. Like Jack White is really nobody compared to Jimmy Page.
It
It
and
was
the
just
Edge.
a weird cast of people to bring together.
Like me
to
and
be
Connor were
honest.
talking about this a couple days ago when we first were talking about this movie. It's like they couldn't get a hold of anybody else.
Yeah, like those were
Like
two
out of all the guitar
well-known-
players from the '80s, you're going to choose the Edge.
Yeah,
Like
It was like 45% Jack White, like
Mhm.
30% The Edge, and then like 25% Jimmy Page.
Yeah, and it's just so weird.
I just
Did
wonder if
Jimmy
there was
Page-
a lot of like issues with trying to maybe bring certain guitarists together because like the Edge is pretty neutral and
Yeah.
Jack White is kind of like I'll take anything type attitude.
well, he has to because he's nobody.
Well,
I wouldn't go
Now,
that
he's
far.
not. He's like I said. He's like a top mid-level B-list
No.
Yeah,
guitarist.
Is Jimmy Page? Jimmy Page had those same kind of roots, the blues kind of
Yeah.
Yeah.
roots. It's almost like he had the same kind of roots as Jack White. Jack White had the
yeah.
black blues.
We could have
And it's
found
the same kind
so
of-
Page
many.
did a lot better
They,
with it.
right. They seem to
Yeah,
have the-
obviously.
right.
And
They
a lot
seem to have the
earlier.
same roots, while the Edge's roots were more. I don't want to say political, but kind of politically because
Well-
of the way what was going on in Ireland at the time, and the whole
The punk
U2's
movement
whole-
and stuff.
image. It's a lot of political stuff.
Yeah,
Because I mean, you can't help it because of where they grew up.
yeah, exactly. And they
Northern
highlight that
Ireland
in the
and-
movie.
So it's like his influence wasn't. You could tell by the Edge's playing that his influence isn't blues based, like
Yeah, exactly.
Page and White's is. So they had a contrast there going there also.
Yeah, it's just like you said. I mean, I just think there's so many guitars probably from both those eras that you could have like brought
Yeah.
together. I'm just curious. Like,
I mean, like I don't want to be like, oh, Eddie Van Halen, but
no, because
Eddie Van Halen's probably more of a recognizable '80s guitar player than
he's
the Edge.
also
All
a
day
dick,
long.
dude. I'm sorry.
Yeah, he
like
is.
him sitting there with Jimmy Page. It probably.
Yeah,
I think the
that
two
might
of
be a
them just
problem.
kind of
Well, they're
fit
boys.
to, like be character.
You sure?
Yeah, Jimmy Page and Eddie Van Halen are boys.
Yeah, but it's like if I'm sitting there watching I think maybe that was it. It was almost like a step down pedestal, like Jimmy Page to the Edge to Jack White, and it
Yeah.
wasn't like going down like all the way to like a total shit guitarist, but like you
Yeah.
kind of got like a hierarchy of these guitarists. Because
That's kind of what it was like too. Yeah.
Imagine like watching like Satriani, Pertucci, and like Ingve all talk. It'd probably get annoying because everyone's just
Yeah.
trying to outdo each other.
Yeah.
See who can play the fastest.
That's what, like it was.
Yeah.
And then conversations about their guitars,
And then
it-
Petrucci just shit all over everybody.
It was just weird that I got to see Jack White kind of take the reins of this movie. Almost.
There's-
like,
yeah.
it's just very
Like no one else from the 2000s though that is like as recognizable as Jack
Well,
White.
it's like we were talking about
guitar-player-wise.
too. Like no one has really done anything with the instrument that since like the 80s, really.
Any guitar players that could
Yeah.
even come close to rivaling Jack White in relevance from the 2000s weren't singers.
Yeah,
They were just the guitarists in their bands.
I feel like
Well,
though
so, I mean,
maybe
so
they
is
could have
The
replaced
Edge,
Jack White
essentially,
with
and
somebody
so
from
is
like
yeah, but he
Jimmy
was
like
in a
Page.
grunge.
era where rock stars got pumped up and were
Yeah,
famous.
because
But I feel like they could have replaced Jack White with like Jerry Cantrell or Chris Cornell
Well,
or
They would have had to add
When was
fourth,
this-
I feel like. 'cause
when
you
was
have-
this
they were
filmed?
trying to bring it into modern day. Jack White was
Yeah.
more relevant
When was
10
this
years
filmed?
ago. It's like
10 years ago.
yeah,
Okay.
2008.
10 years
They
ago.
should have had Alex Lifeson
all right.
Yeah, that would have been cool too.
for the 80s
10
guitar
years
player.
ago.
That would have been really cool.
Because he
Yeah.
was influenced by Jimmy Page.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Or maybe that's why they did that, because the Edge was not influenced by Jimmy Page at all.
Yeah.
And Jack White wasn't influenced by either of them.
Yeah.
And maybe it was like, here's three totally different dudes
Yeah.
that have no connection to one another at all. Let's see how they react to
There
one
has,
another.
yeah, there like, and this is all obviously skepticism and
we
theory,
would like
but
to
it's
get in touch
there
with
is, like,
Davis
a-
Guggenheim.
I'm just
and ask
curious
him.
what was if this was like the initial plan and like why, or if something happened and there were supposed to be other individuals. Because again, they're all recognizable artists, but it's just a very weird cast to put next to Jimmy Page. So
Yeah.
I'm wondering what the intent was.
But anyways,
Yeah.
out of our scores, what would you give this one? Michaelson's you're our guest today. Out of a 1 to 10, or 1 to 100, if you want to get
1 to 10.
metrics.
Keep it simple. 1 to 10. Well, the metrics.
7.
7.
7 out of 10.
What about you, Connor?
I was thinking 6.5.
I was also thinking a 7.
I was. You know what? I'll just make this easy on everyone. I'll do a 6.5 also.
7.75.
Yeah.
Or 6.75.
If there was more Jimmy Page, I would have given it
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like honestly, I didn't care to hear about the Edge and all of his fucking pedals
And-
because
but
I can do that
The
shit
thing
here.
about it is, though, it's the scenes in there that are a little like drawn out. Why is he talking? Like, how come there's not enough of this? They weren't bad though.
No, it wasn't
You know,
bad.
like we've
but
seen
I
some
would've-
other movies
Seeing
with like
Jimmy
drawn
Page
out.
rip on the Dan Electro is the my
And
favorite
playing the
Like,
part.
put it
mandolin.
this way,
Yeah, it's just
from-
like sitting there playing the mandolin out in the front yard or whatever.
Yeah.
If there was more Page, it would
Good.
got a higher
Yeah,
review.
well, like think about when we did Devil at the Crossroads.
Oh
It was
my
a
God.
documentary with insight, and it was just absolutely boring. Like every scene just felt like filler. Like it was
Yeah.
just, but it's like that's the thing. There weren't even scenes in there to enjoy. This actually has some moments in there. Like even just getting to see Jimmy just play for them just for a quick 30 seconds is just
I feel like if you weren't like a fan, like a guitar player fan,
Yeah.
I feel like you would rate this movie higher. But it's like us being musicians and knowing how
Yeah, if you get
influential
more
these
stunned
people
by it.
are. Yes.
And the 7 is kind of like high in my eyes to say that because again, I say 7 just for the sake of like going to view it. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? Um,
It's definitely magical the first time you watch it.
Yeah,
and the
it's-
second would
it's an
probably be
interesting
a little-
watch, put it that way.
Yeah.
And Jimmy Page sitting in that room full of LPs and 45s. And
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
His record
I even
collection was
mentioned that
insane.
specifically. Like, I want a room like that
That's
to just be
just
able
really
to
cool.
listen.
Just insane. Imagine how much money he
Yeah.
has in records.
Phew. Unbelievable, man.
Hundreds of or tens of thousands at least.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're actually a little bit less than the normal ratings. Rotten Tomatoes gave it 80%. Audience score was 85%. IMDb was 7.6 out of 10, and Metacritic gave it a 70.
So we're about on point with like what Metacritic and
Yeah.
IMDb. Right there.
Cosmo Landesman from the UK Times says, for guitar freaks and fans of these guys, the film gives you a unique chance to hang out with some real guitar heroes. I wouldn't call the Edge and Jack White guitar heroes, but Jimmy Page's guitar hero-ness makes up for the other two.
From the average listener, I would say, yeah, you'd be like cool. It's the Edge.
Yeah,
I remember when they put that album on my iPhone in 2014.
it all comes full circle.
I'm so glad I got
All
that for
roads led to
free.
this. The London Evening Standard says the film gets up close and personal, proving that each is a musician first and a rock and roll star afterwards. You know, I kind of didn't get that vibe though, that they were like trying to be like rock stars or whatever, like at all.
No,
but
they were just
No,
showing
they were
how
chilling.
they play.
yeah,
Yeah,
that's a generic review. Like, oh yeah, they're not rock stars; they're just musicians first. All right. Our group suggestion this week for all of you friendly and great listeners out there, including all of our international listeners, we'd like to thank you guys once again for checking us out. Our suggestion is the movie on Netflix documentary titled 27 Gone Too Soon, directed by Simon Napier Bell. I actually can't wait to watch this one.
I heard it was amazing, dude.
I'm excited. Like, I wonder if I'm going to find out anything new.
I tried to find reviews for it and I couldn't find anything.
The only thing
I
I'm
hope
gonna
that
say
that's
is
not
I
something.
really hope it's not just like boring, like Wikipedia fact, basic information.
Yeah, I hope it's not either.
I really hope it's not like.
But anyway,
that.
guys, check it out.
Let's get into our personal suggestions this week. Michael, you go first. Do you have anything you want to suggest to our listeners here?
Just like I said in the beginning, check out Tal Winkenfeld. She's really incredible. The album she finally put out on her own called Love Remains, and there's a song on it called Killing Me. It's just really different and it's so different than what's out today, and it's really, really good tune. And she's really a great bass player and a great musician.
Perfect. What do you got, Connor?
I got My Bloody Valentine's comeback album from 2013, MBV.
Nice.
It's a really great album. It's like they're like Tool times like 30 with the like delays. It's crazy.
When you say Tool times 30, you're talking about like
Their last album before this is like in the top 3 most acclaimed albums of the 90s, and it was from 91, and they never officially broke up, I don't think.
because Tool didn't get really like with the
Yeah.
effects until like Enema, which was like 96. So you're saying like that era of
I'm
Tool?
saying like they take forever to follow.
Yeah.
that shit up.
Oh, like in
Like the
that
difference between 10,000 Days and
like
Fear
that
Inoculous.
sound. Okay, you're saying
Yeah.
like time gap wise.
Yeah, we're talking what, like 20 through 2 years?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's insane. That's a lot of time.
Check out She Found Now or New You. If you like those songs, you probably like the whole album.
Nice. What about you, Steven?
Mine is going to be the third release by the band The Stooges, 1973. The album's Raw Power. The song I'm recommending is the second one. It's called Gimme Danger. Iggy Pop.
Little Stranger.
Yeah, it's a really good album front to back. It's actually like one of my like go-tos when I had it on CD. But yeah, it's a really good album. Third album by The Stooges, Raw Power.
Awesome. My suggestion this week is from my newer interesting from the beginning of this episode, the band Camino album Try Hard. Probably the song I would show or have people check out would be What I Want or Daphne Blue. They're both extremely good songs. Definitely
If you
something
had
to
to
check
take
out.
one to a desert island, which one would you pick? Just one song.
Probably What I Want.
Okay.
All right, great.
Thanks.
So Desert Islands,
We all know that
Generations,
Tom
and
Hanks would take Tom Hanks would take Nevermind.
yeah,
We knew that. Nevermind would be the soundtrack to Castaway if it was made today, based on this recommendation.
Castaway was closer to Nevermind than today.
It was closer to Nevermind than it was to Appetite.
Well, yeah, it's because Appetite came before Nevermind.
Exactly. It was meant to be. And somehow Lars Ulrich is involved.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, that about wraps it up for this week.
Thanks for having me again.
Not a
Absolutely.
problem, Michael. We'd like to, thank Michael once again for coming on. Yeah, you guys will be.
Studio audience going crazy.
Wild.
This is Rage Against the Mainstream signing off once again. This is Bill.
Connor.
Steve.
Mike.
Thank you guys for listening. We will catch you next week.